In Tala, when I started the cooperative organization helping women to help themselves, they were trained on sewing machine and other things. And they were illiterate women. But once they were trained and worked and earned money, they felt themselves, they felt their identity. They even stopped quarreling at home with their husbands, asking them for money all the time. They started to feel that they are partners and equal to their husbands. Even it helped in family planning because they didn't want more children to secure them. On the contrary, they wanted to work and to be free. This is such an example for women if they are put on the right track. To those who believe that to invest in a girl is not worthwhile, I say to educate a girl is to educate a family and eventually a nation. Recently, a UN report revealed that for every dollar spent on education in the Middle East, 135 are spent on weapons. Is not education of the people worth at least the same attention? In Egypt, less than 10% of the budget is spent on education. And we are not at the bottom of the list. Iraq is. Lebanon and Syria spend more and have higher literacy rates. On the other hand, Jordan spends less but has an 80% literacy rate. Ironically, Iran spends the most, but only slightly more than half of the people are considered literate. Perhaps then money is not the sole requirement for a literate population. Perhaps it is a question of attitude, the attitude of the people, the attitude of the government. As you ponder these statistics, remember always that women are more than 50% of the world's population and 70% of the world's illiterate and poor. I've spoken today of the pioneer women who devoted themselves and dedicated their lives to the betterment of Egyptian and Middle Eastern women. Furthermore, their efforts have contributed to the betterment of our countries and ultimately our part of the world. The road these pathfinders blazed for us, however, is far from finished. To paraphrase the American poet Robert Frost, we have miles to go before we sleep. The 21st century can either see more of us lost in the wilderness or more of us prepared to contribute to the future. A Chinese proverb reads, "Women hold up half of the world." This is true, but we will drop our half if our footing in the world does not improve, if we are not educated, if we do not control the population, if we are not audible voices in the setting of the policies for economic and social development, if we are not proponents of peace, there can be no development, no equality until peace is a reality in the Middle East. Our vocation must be for peace. Our call must be for peace. Our actions must be for peace. We are the mothers, the wives, the sisters and daughters of those who fight and die. Our very nature is consecration of the idea of love and justice and hope. The legacy of courage and influence bequeathed to us from the pioneer women of our countries demands the best of us. Let us remember our heritage, and in the spirit of those who have sacrificed for us, let us be pioneers for progress and peace. Thank you, and God bless you. Thank you. Thank you.
But before we do that, I would like to mention that the president of the Egyptian community did arrive. There is... I would also like to mention that Ambassador Fargal has, the ambassador of Egypt, has sent us his wife, and she is with us, and I would like to recognize her. She came on behalf of her husband. I was not aware of that, Mrs. Fargal. So, would you move to the microphones? We'll call this one microphone 1 and this one microphone 2. So microphone 1, would you identify yourself, please?
Is me Samir Tabar. It's a very simple question. I would like to know if the wearing of a hijab, wearing of a veil, is that a symbol of repression or not?
Oppression. Well, hijab is something which is, I mean, you have to know hijab during Huda Sha'rawi and our pioneers whom I mentioned was something to cover their face and only their eyes were shown, and to cover the head and to wear long dresses, long dresses. This is the hijab. We have another hijab which has nothing to do with the face. The face is open, and in Islam there is nothing for the face to be covered. In the Quran there are some one surahs which says that, of course, the hijab is for the Prophet's wives. This is something, but for the mu'minat, whom the believers, the women who are believers, they can hijab. It was a discussion also for people saying hijab, which means ما يحجب الشيء عن الآخر, which means what prevent something from the other, and they took it hijab. Others, they explained it that at that time, before Islam, that the women used to wear something open, their dresses were open, and when they feed their children, it shows their breasts, and that's why this came to cover this area here. Well, there are so many things, but in Islam, as a Muslim woman, to tell you the truth, I believe that Islam is much deeper than things like that. Islam needs a woman to be conservative in her dress, not to wear something opened or things, to be respectable in her dress. And much more important than hijab is her behavior, her attitude, her worshipping God and doing what right to do in her society and with her community and towards her family and her country. This is most important thing for women to be, to give the Islam a wonderful image in front of the whole world by representing it in a good way.
Microphone number 2.
Shukran.
Oh, Your Excellency, this is a great honor to be able to, if Dr. Bib will allow, I would just like to thank you on behalf of all young women, that you've really done amazing things, and the word has spread. I mean, I spent last year as an intern at the United Nations working on the Beijing Women's Conference, and that's where I first learned about a lot of the things that you've started and what you've done, and I think your impact has spread all over the United Nations and all over the world. So on behalf of all of us young women, I would really like to thank you, and shukran, which I think is in Arabic.
Thank you so much.
And my question is more political. I'd like to know what your opinion is of the new wave of terrorism, Islamic fundamentalist terrorism that's sweeping across Egypt, and what impact that will have on women, and some of the reforms that you brought in. Will that have a detrimental effect? Thank you.
Well, fundamentalist is an obstacle not only in front of women, but in front of the whole country wherever they are, because fundamentalists are not only in Egypt, they are everywhere in the whole world. It's something really, it's a pity that we can see them everywhere, and as I mentioned today, the McVeigh, the young boy who, destroyed the Oklahoma building, well, he is a fanatic, but he's not a Muslim, okay? Then fanatics are from every religion and from every country. In Egypt, there was recently a conference which our president held it and invited other presidents, including the American president and the Russian and so many others. They came to Egypt to try to organize between all these countries and use their experts and their experience and all these things to curb the activities of the terrorists and the fundamentalists, wherever they are. And I hope they will come with something and they will do something, because we needed it terribly, because it's not, as I said, it's not an obstacle in front the improvement of women. No, it's an obstacle in front of the improvement of the whole society wherever they are. And I hope also that they get to know that nothing from what they are doing will stop the peace. Peace is going to continue, because the big majority everywhere in the Arab countries, in Israel, all over the world, really, they wanted to live in peace, and they wanted to bring up their children in an atmosphere full of peace for them. Nobody wanted terrorists at all.
Microphone number 1.
Hello, I'm Elise Abul Khair, and I would like to say that as an Arab woman, I very much admire and respect not only the amount of political recognition and activity that you've done, but the respect that you've gained of both Arab men and women in the Middle East. And I'd like to ask you, what was the greatest barrier that you found in gaining this respect of the Middle Eastern people, and if it still stands in for a woman who is trying to gain that kind of public recognition today? Thank you.
First of all, I want to thank you so much for your lovely words. The thing which I don't pay attention to is the criticism, because if I will pay attention to what I hear, really I will stop working. You see, and as the saying says, that the tree which has fruits, people, they throw it with the stones, but the tree which is empty without any fruits, no one pay attention to it. And I'm proud, really, as I said, I was not alone. I was having many women with me, or otherwise I couldn't have done anything. But sometimes there was a time when my husband was still alive that, when I was severely criticized as a human being, I'm not iron or something, I'm blood and flesh, and I have my emotions and feelings. Sometimes it hurts me, really. But then I think of, if I will stop, then I will give them the opportunity which they want. Someone has to face the criticism. Someone has to take the blame, but to continue and to keep continuing for others to follow and to benefit from the rights they have. Thank you.
Microphone number 2.
Hi, my name is Maria Al-Bisri, and hi again, Mrs. Sadat. I have a question. You've talked earlier about how women and their role in the peace process and the peace in general. I want to ask you, what do you think would be the role of the women in the Middle East and in the Muslim world in fighting against the political oppression that the whole area is subjected to sometimes?
I think also that I explained that the pressure on women, not from Islam, it's from traditions, and I don't want you to be confused between both. Islam gave women many rights at a time when other women didn't have it. For instance, one of these, a woman can sell, can buy, can do whatever she wants in her things which she owns and possessions without asking her husband. And this law, the French took it just less than, 50 years or something like that. But we had this law since 1,414 years ago. This is one of the things, but as I said, women went through ups and downs through the Ottoman Empire. It was such a time which women were oppressed at that time. But your question about the role of women or the Muslim women in the Middle East?
No, my question is about their fight against political oppression, against oppression in general inside the society, not specifically from an Islamic point of view, but
pressure on women.
Not only on women, pressure on the society in general. What is their role?
From whom? From the governments, you mean?
Well, whatever apparatus, I suppose.
I would say in Egypt, we don't have this oppression. We are free. We have democracy. We can criticize the president himself if we wish, and no one can tell anyone anything. Anyone can criticize the president and he will not be in jail. We have democracy in Egypt. We don't have oppression. And I believe with more democracy, everywhere there will be never oppression on anyone, really.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Number one.
Yes, my name is Jehan LeRoux. I wrote to you a couple of times after you wrote your book about your life history, which I really liked, by the way. But I also was very impressed by your description of when you went to Hajj, because I really thought, or I really believed that you were a very spiritual woman. About a year ago, I became myself Muslim, so I'm very happy about that. First of all, I would like to say salam alaikum to you. And I was wondering, you were mentioning about hijab. That's how really I became Muslim. It's because of the fight of hijab over in Canada, where some people thought that it was a sign of oppression. And the answer that you gave before did not quite give me the answers that I was looking for, especially since I read the Quran, in quite a few places in the Quran. They do suggest that all women should cover. I know, I'm not covered, I'm learning. But to me, as the new Muslim, as somebody that really loves Islam, who's very proud to be Muslim, I would like to ask for your support to at least give the pride, or at least for any woman that is covered, to feel proud of it.
Oh, sure.
Or what is your impression?
Oh, sure, I am very proud. I am a real Muslim woman. I'm very proud of my religion. I follow everything in my religion. And as I said, the hijab, it's a point which has many discussion around it, that I couldn't say it's yes or no. Because I myself, as a Muslim, I believe to give a good image of Islam, you have to give this image not necessarily by covering your hair, not necessarily, because there are so many symbols also in the Quran that I feel myself, and maybe I am wrong. What I feel is that Islam, and this is I am right, is much deeper in so many things, in our attitude, as I said, in our behavior, our honesty, everything to deal with others, to set an example as much as you can as a human being, to be honest in all your work, in all your treatments. But to put this, it's not necessary. And in my behavior, if I'm working with hundreds of men, it doesn't mean that I have to cover my hair so that they will not look at me or something like that. No, it's the behavior which is much more important. And this is what I believe in.
My Microphone number 2.
Yes, my name is Zahia Al-Masri, and my question is, Egypt has always taken the role of the mother towards our Arabic countries, and what role do you see Egypt taking now in this shaping world with the peace process and everything that's going on?
Well, I'm very proud, as usual, of Egypt, and now Egypt is continuing what my husband started in peace. Egypt is playing a very important role in bringing about the Arabs and the Israelis. Egypt has relations with Israel, and she has good relations also with the Arabs, and that is the very important role which Egypt is playing to bring them about. And you can see even in the newspaper, whenever there is any kind of difficulties between Arafat and the Israelis, they immediately go to Egypt. And our president is the one to bring them about, because he is the one who have good relations with Israel and good relations with the Arabs. And Egypt wanted to continue the role which Sadat started, and wanted peace to prevail in every part of the Middle East.
Thank you.
Microphone number 1.
Hello, my name is Rania Masri, and I'm very proud of the status we have gained in the Middle East. But you have talked of countries as Egypt, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Palestine. But what about Saudi Arabia? I have lived there for several years, and whenever I hear the Occident people talk about Muslim women, we're portrayed as the Saudi women and the way they are treated in Saudi Arabia.
Well, Saudi Arabia is very, very conservative, really more than any of the other countries, because of the holy places there. But I wanted to tell you something. Women in Saudi Arabia, they have improved a lot. They are going to universities now. They can study in the faculty of medicine, they can be teachers, they can be bankers, and there are bankers and teachers and doctors, gynecologists, pediatricians in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is giving more rights to women and more education and more opportunities for women, but because of the holy places there, they are very cautious about not giving too much. But women are educated, and now they are having much more opportunity than many, many years before.
Thank you.
I'm going to take this last question at
Hello,
microphone number 2.
Thank you. Hello, Mrs. Sadat. My name is Maysoum Mansour. As a Muslim, Palestinian, Arab Canadian, I'd like to welcome you to Concordia and to Canada. And let me just say that I'm extremely proud that the First Lady, that the first former First Lady that visits Concordia is an Arab one.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm curious to, I'll come just a little bit, I'd like to mention something before I ask my question, actually. Many people have false conceptions or misconceptions about the confusion between Islam and the treatment of women, and whether a veil is an oppressive sign or a phenomenon that is leading women towards submission. It is very easy to confuse what God's words are when a person themselves is confused. And it's confused because of personal bias, because of chauvinistic views, because of selfish reasons, because of what have you. I mean, even women could misinterpret the Quran. It's not a question of male or female. But the point I'm trying to say is, it will be clarified if I share something with you. I was at a Canadian Arab
Could
conference.
you formulate your question, please?
Yes, I will. I'm just going to give a simple example. Just about a month ago at Toronto, there was a Canadian Arab Women Conference. And one of the issues they were talking about is that the phenomenon of practicing female genital mutilation, which is something equivalent to male circumcision, is widely practiced in parts of Africa. And because the conference was a Canadian Arab conference for women, the issue of Sudan and southern Egypt was discussed as, this is not an Arab phenomenon nobody knows of and nobody hears of. And what was interesting is that in those countries, in Sudan and in South, in the southern Egyptian parts, people there say that it is a Quranic practice, it is a prophetic tradition to circumcise women, which is actually a demeaning process, a process that violates the soul of the woman, and leaves her shattered. So basically, I'm just trying to emphasize that people's traditions and old habits are always going to be there with them, but please never confuse them, never mix them, and be clear about what is said as a tradition or a cultural practice. I mean, Islam banned the burial of female children. My question is,
yes.
Would you please share with me, because I'm very curious to know how the Islamic groups in Egypt in the 70s reacted to your law of actually by force of law having the man officially notify his wife of, in case of polygamy. So what were the encounters? Did they accuse you? I've heard and I've read that you were accused of violating Islamic set rules. So please, could you shed some light?
Well,
Thank you.
First of all, there is nothing in the Quran, no single word about circumcision for girls. Nothing at all in the Quran about this.
I know that.
And it is very, very rarely with the illiterate people, and few of them, because education in Egypt is free and compulsory for the first 6 years. And people who send, even in the rural areas, the illiterate people who send their children to the school, the girls, they are not anymore making this circumcision at all. And this is something which I wonder from where they hear about it. I forgot about it even when I was a child. I never heard about it in Egypt, which is very, very rare. And it has nothing to do with Islam. These are traditions which disappearing. The other thing you talked about,
the reaction of the Muslim groups to your
to the law.
To you being supportive of the law that had
First of all, the law which I am very proud of to say that I was behind it and gave so many rights to women, it is from the Quran and the Sharia. We never had a law coming, out of the gloom. It's from the Quran and from the Sharia, and as I said before, that Islam gave many rights to women, but they didn't know about it, or they were not aware of their rights. And this law gave the women, as I said, the custody, it's in Islam. The alimony, it's in Islam. The man to tell his wife that he is going. The man in Islam has the right to marry 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Before Islam, the man used to marry maybe 20, 30, whatever the number. But Islam came to put an end to this, and in the Quran it is written, if you treat them fairly and equally, if not, then 1. What does this mean really? Some of the Arab countries, in Tunisia, I don't know if you know it or not, in Tunisia they forbid a man to marry more than 1, because they say that it is written in the Quran, if you don't treat them fairly and equally, and this will never happen, then 1, which means only 1. But in Egypt, we were more flexible, We put an obstacles in front of the man. But he has to reform his wife. If he's going to marry, his wife has to know. And this is in Islam.
I agree with you 100%. It's just that the men were never really forced to actually have to report by law. So that, I'm sure...
No, now he is forced by law, or otherwise he will be in prison. Yes,
I know that, but were people like... Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. We're not going to take any more questions. We have already gone from 7 o'clock to 20 to 9.
Just one last one, please. Just
Well, no,
last
I'm sorry, we're no longer going to take
Small
any
one.
questions.
Just this small.
Okay, very quickly.
Very good. Okay, what would you say for this? Because you know, Egypt, they signed a peace with Israel in 1979. Egypt signed a peace process whatever with Israel.
Yes.
If we take it as an example right now, what happened? Like, what is the situation of Egypt between that peace and after that peace with Israel? How would you, just in a few words, how would you comment on that? And one more point to answer.
Well, there's only one question.
I finished. That's my question.
Okay.
The situation of Egypt before and after the peace with Israel, because we're going to take it as an example for the future, signing peace with Israel and Palestinian Syrian. And there's another, I would just want to answer one girl asking, she was with the UN, whatever. She said those fundamentalists in Egypt. Well, let me say, these are not fundamentalists, these are opposers or opponents. And what it's called fundamentalist, from her point of view, it's not a fundamentalist. And it's, since there's no democracy in the world, they call them fundamentalism. They are only opposing. So I really want to hear your answer for that situation of Egypt.
The first question about Egypt having peace with Israel, I think that Egypt set the example for others, and although Sadat was, threatened and accused as a traitor, and I can't tell you the things which were said about him, but the time came and the years passed that made all the people, the opponents to Sadat, get to know that he was right, and he was just advanced than his time, ahead of his time. And we can see now, that Jordan had made peace with Israel, the Palestinians had made peace with Israel, and the Syrian will come, I hope, and they will be coming, of course, because there will be peace in the whole region. About the other thing, what you said. And that's it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'd like to ask you to remain seated. We have a closing line with this, but before I ask Professor Peluso to thank Mrs. Sadat, would you please remain seated? I would like to say that Mrs. Sadat has just given you a face of Islam that many of you do not know, the compassionate face of Islam. One particular thing that has always struck me with regard to her late husband, and that was when the Shah of Iran in 1979 was thrown out of every country in the world, her husband offered the Shah of Iran, whether you agree with the Shah or you don't agree with the Shah, that's not the question. On a humanitarian basis, her husband offered, in the name of Islam, a home for the dying Shah. This is a face of Islam that many people forget. And Mrs. Sadat, we remember what your husband did. Ask Professor Peluso to terminate this wonderful session. Professor Peluso.
Thank you. It is true that there are many wonderful pioneers that are women in your country, but it is also true that you yourself, vous êtes une femme assez courageuse. Et c'est à travers vos mots et vos actions qui nous inspirent à devenir nous-mêmes des agents actifs pour la paix et l'égalité au monde entier. The women and children of the world owe you a great gratitude for the work that you have done and the work that you have pioneered on an international level. For us here at Concordia, and for the women here at Concordia, but most particularly for the women from the Middle East. And I'd like to present you my graduate assistant, who is Simara Ayasrina from Lebanon herself. She is studying political science. And I'd like to introduce you to her and to offer you a small token of our appreciation for your great work.
I would like to thank all of you for this wonderful reception that you have given to Madame Sadat. I would like particularly to thank our rector for coming this evening despite the storm that he has faced in Toronto. And I'd like to say one last word about our dean, the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Science, who's sitting with us and was most intense listening to the debate that Mrs. Sadat was bringing up. She has lived in Egypt herself, and she's very keen about everything Egyptian. I could look at her eyes and see her expression. Dean Gail Valaskakis.
Just want to get a little shot of you right now for our footage. How are you? Fine. That was good. Something from the ethnic level that was together funded Concordia. Because we felt, since we are the children of Concordia, we have gained from Concordia, and I graduated from engineering. Yes, and hello. Hi. That's good. This is Jared.
مش كفايه ان
لو سمحت انا دكتور واحد يقول لي هو ده اللي كان سبب الاختلاف كتير.
Thank you very much for your speech. It was really very nice.
No, it's okay. Samira, you're always impressing me. I'll see you then.